I've grown allergic to status and recap meetings. I cannot stand inefficiencies, and it's not because I'm not OCD. I kind of like chaos a little bit, and I don't mind when things
Sure.
get messy. It's not a matter of being a taskmaster when I think of productivity. When I see lack of productivity, I see just missed opportunities. I see a culture being built where people aren't able to thrive.
The pursuit of excellence is something we're all striving towards.
I want you to focus on what you do best.
You need to have an approval. How many approvals? What are the steps?
It's really about listening.
If it's not documented, it's not done.
Thanks for tuning into In Systems We Trust, the show where we dive into all things systems and processes and hear from the professionals that are using them to change the landscape of their organizations every day. Welcome back to another episode of In Systems We Trust. Today, I'm talking with Trae Nickleson. Trae is an experienced startup marketing and technology consultant with a demonstrated history of helping startups and early stage businesses gain traction that counts. Also a startup founder with a passion for digital advertising, privacy, consumer data, and the economics of media. Trae, it is with great pleasure that I welcome you to the show today.
Yeah, thanks, Marquis. I've been excited about joining you, so look forward to talking. Yeah.
Yeah, likewise. I'm really looking forward to, talking systems today and talking, work management and all those other things. So, as a founding partner at Grip, what can you kind of just walk us through what that looks like? What is Grip? We're talking today because we're aligned in, many ways, but what is Grip? What does your organization do? Who do you help? Just kind of give us some background there.
Yeah, glad to. See if I can fumble through this. Yeah, so our audience is startups, founding teams that are ready to scale. They've kind of their head down. They're probably focused on building a good product, but they're starting to, maybe they've raised a round of funding. They're starting to build that team. And so there's an inflection point that we try to reach out to them and say, okay, you kind of need some ops people and some ops systems. And we're a good outsource model for that. So we both give them the staff to help them. And this, by staff, I mean probably a combination of, think of chief of staff, office manager, executive assistant, all the team that can basically keep a founder out of the weeds. We provide that staff, but kind of our differentiation is that staff is hardcore trained in OKRs and productivity and the best practices. They're not just hiring somebody that kind of fits the job description. We are installing what we think of as an operating system that includes both the people to help you run it, the processes and best practices such as OKRs and other kind of goal-driven frameworks, and the productivity tools that become the tech stack that kind of set the groundwork. And so there's some inputs and outputs into the operating system. But at the core, we try and package it all up and say, okay, this is a big checklist off your list. This is going to help you establish culture, a lot of best practices immediately. Your board's going to love it because they're going to see some structure to what you're building and some goals that you're setting, and they're going to know how to follow you and talk to you. That's kind of the general offering, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So why startups then? Is it the fact that you can get them up and running and get some quick wins in there and help them really establish a ground or a baseline, for their operations? Why have you decided to tap into that section of the market?
Yeah, that's probably just my own background. For some reason, I just love the startup environment. I'm a startup founder myself. For the past 7 or 8 years, I've consulted with a firm here in Silicon Valley, that Keating Consulting Group, that basically puts in teams around finance functions, interim CFO, accounting, some HR elements. I've just seen that be a great model for startups. That's the territory I'm comfortable with. It's what I get excited about. But I do think too, the startup culture, especially here in Silicon Valley, it's not limited to Silicon Valley by any means. But there is a thought process here of, efficiency and productivity and speed and agileness, all the things that kind of structured chaos that I just like, and it tends to, I don't know, that kind of fosters in the startup community. So it's just something and basically my network is growing around startups, so that's almost all I know. I couldn't go into a Fortune 1000 company and talk the language that, I don't speak the language there. So.
No, that makes sense. And so, yeah, give me more on your background then. I mean, before we really dive right in here, I mean, you come from the world of consulting, you come from the world of finance. You're at, Keating Consulting Group. Maybe tell me more about that and, what, your history and your background, has done for you in this venture in what Grip is offering. Can you maybe give us some more insight on the background there?
Sure. Yeah. The most relevant background that kind of traces the path to where I am now is the work. Now, first of all, I'm a marketer. I'm not a finance person. Even at at Keating Consulting Group, that county that firm, I'm in charge of kind of the broader picture strategies, business development. What do we need to be, kind of thing, and how do we form up our own team? So, working in that environment, just running across startup founding teams who are trying to raise money, who are trying to, or maybe they've raised money and they're trying to grow, they're experiencing these growing pains. You come in contact with all these problems and solutions on a continuous creative cycle. And that just being able to witness that has kind of informed the way I think about things.
Yeah.
I've grown allergic to status and recap meetings. I cannot stand inefficiencies, and it's not because I'm not OCD. I kind of like chaos a little bit, and I don't mind when things get messy. It's not a matter of being a taskmaster when I think of productivity. When I see lack of productivity, I see just missed opportunities. I see a culture being built where people aren't able to thrive, and people aren't aligned. And so, just in witnessing that happen, especially and most of the time when a founder or a startup team comes to an interim CFO group, they are, if they're first time founders, they come because they want help fundraising. If they're experienced founders, they come because they already realize what it takes to get fundraising, and they know they need good systems to attract good funding and good VC. So it's just kind of bearing witness to that over the years, and seeing some cool opportunities to help these startups at least build this baseline where on top of this baseline, their innovation and their what they're building, they can really focus on the things that matter. And so it's just become important to me to set that baseline, establish these best practices, get that out of their mindset, and let them focus on innovation. It's
Right.
just, yeah. So that's just kind of how I got to my current thinking, is just witnessing that over the past few years. So.
And how do those engagements typically go? Are you approaching these startups, these founders, these C-level, execs, and kind of talking through the problems that you see as a consultant, as a systems person, and kind of identifying the roadblocks that they could potentially come up against, or are they coming to you, knowing that you're an established subject matter expert in this field? How do those things typically start, and what does that process look like for identifying those key clients and working them through to a process or a place where you can say, I can work with you. I have the solution to fix your problems because I know this space.
Yeah, it's a mix. I would say that you're certainly more successful, and the relationship gets off to a better start if the person coming to you is already aware of the problem, is already experienced, already kind of sees they need these systems. They need good books, for instance, in finance, or they need a good financial model on the finance side, or they need good productivity or OKRs. If they're already kind of in tune with that, and like I said, that's usually an experienced founder. They've already lived that. It's an ex-Googler or an ex-Facebook person who's starting their own thing, and they're bringing the need for that structure with them. They know that that's got to be there so that they can innovate. If you've got a first-time founder, you're doing a little more education along the way, and it's a little bit longer sales cycle, a little bit. I love working with those type of teams, the first-time founders, but the approach with them is just look around at what the best practices are that are already established. Don't try and reinvent the wheel here. We've solved this problem. These problems have been solved, and you want to be Facebook, Google, whatever, LinkedIn. You want to be one of these innovative tech, companies. That's what you want to become. Learn from them right now. Establish that now early on, and then you've kind of set the launch pad for what you really want to distinguish your startup as. So, you have to, for my own practice, there's opportunities to network with great like-minded firms like Ditto, yourself and Ditto, and
Yeah.
just establish a little bit of thought leadership is key to kind of attracting that discussion. Um, yeah, so yeah, part of your question, I kind of want to answer your question a little bit in what I find
Yeah, it's okay.
in talking with new leads, and that varies a lot. You know, it's of course easier from from a consultant standpoint to talk to somebody who's already like-minded and they're already kind of in tune with what you're selling.
I agree.
Yeah. Um, so I don't know if that's a helpful answer or not, but yeah, it varies. It's kind of my
No,
non-answer there. Yeah. Yeah.
it absolutely is. And that last part that you said there, I mean, in this space, yeah, we're kind of doing this in the same thing, more than anything, we're peers. And so I think you have to be careful how you approach those leads and how you talk to them because they are savvy. They generally know that they have an issue. And so, yeah, I was curious as to how you identify that or help them identify that if they aren't there. But it seems like, they pretty much know where they stand and they're coming to you because they need that problem solved, right?
Yeah, that's true. And I think that
Yeah.
one thing that I try and pay attention to is put myself in the shoes of the founder. I do have this has helped me over my career because I am a founder myself. So I kind of understand what they're looking for. And
Right.
I'm aware at least of the stages I went through and I'm still going through as a founder and what my needs are. So I try and identify different inflection points, different needs, very specific needs they have. For instance, maybe they are looking out to hire a chief of staff. They're running a want ad, or they've put a notification on LinkedIn that they're looking for an office manager or some kind of ops help. That's an
Yeah.
opportunity. If you can figure out a way I can figure out a way to get in front of them with, I understand your need. And we can solve that need, but we can solve it with a little bit bigger perspective and solve these other needs that you may not have thought
Hmm.
of. Yes, hire your ops manager. You need that, or you need an executive assistant. Yes, you need that, but that probably indicates that you're in an inflection point where you can take advantage of and solve a few more problems that you're about to face. Let's go ahead and get your
Right.
culture established. You're about to start hiring, or you're in the weeds operationally and you need some backup. Let's build these systems that get you out of the weeds. So you kind of
Mm.
identify what they think they need, and you want to answer that. You want to have that solution for them, and maybe that opens up the discussion to the larger solution that you're trying to provide. And you can kind
Right.
of talk bigger benefits, and so that foot in the door, it at least gets you in the room where in the room where it happens, and now you can talk bigger. You're in your position to kind of help them with a bigger solution. That's at least my approach, is to figure out what's the small need. And that when we start talking traction, that kind of lends itself. That's what I mean by traction is you've got this big picture. I don't know if we're ready to launch into traction talk, but that's the overall strategies.
Take us there. Take
Also,
us there.
yeah.
Yeah.
So okay, so traction just means getting somewhere, right? Meaning getting a grip. That's the name of our firm, grip, and making these small steps to get somewhere. So you've got this big vision, this big problem you're trying to solve. Oftentimes that's overwhelming, and you're still in the idea stage, and you'll serve yourself well if you can back up and figure out what are the small steps I need to solve today, this week, to
Hmm.
demonstrate traction. Because when you demonstrate traction, first of all, you're going to be getting somewhere. That's important. But you're also going to be showing the world you're getting somewhere. And the world in this case means investors you're talking to, um, team members you're trying to recruit, partners you're trying to attract. There's a whole lot of people need to see track. They need to see the train leaving before they get interested in talking to you, or the train moving at least, before and they want to run and catch the train. So um,
Yeah.
I'm trying to tie in my own approach to figuring out what type of if they're focused on these small steps they need. I know there's a bigger picture, but I like that they're focusing on, I just need to hire an office manager. I need help, and that's the track.
Definitely.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, definitely. And I'm glad that you went there. I mean, if we're looking at your website, like thegripgroup.com, you've put together, this diagram almost looks like a process map where you talk through, your OS, what you need. And this for me, like you just said, like you see that bigger picture, right?
yeah,
But the startups often don't see it. And so, like, you have tied together how people in ops, marketing, product development, finance all tie into this bigger picture. So can you walk me through, this a little bit
yeah.
more in detail? And what I'm really curious about is when you approach a startup, like you have this big picture, you have this roadmap of where you know that they should go. You've done it, it's tested, it's been proved over and over again. Do you ever have issues with getting the founder to align with your vision of where you think they should go based on your experience? Or does walking them through the Traction or Grip OS help to alleviate any of that uncertainty?
That's a good question. First of all, let me put out there that a lot of, Grip OS is just my marketing wrapper on my thoughts on best practices, and they change. I mean, I'll find something new next month that I want to incorporate into what our firm is offering, right? So I haven't invented anything. I've just wrapped it into this thing that helps me talk about it. And the kind of the diagram you're referring to on our homepage, it just reflects the way I think about things, that you've got to have, yes, we talk about 4 forms of traction. There's team, product, market, and finance. I've just developed a good network of professionals and groups and other firms that are really good at establishing traction on those 3 aspects. And sometimes cool projects come along where I can pull 2 or 3 of them together, or sometimes a client needs traction in all 4. The purpose of that diagram is it's not really prescriptive. It's more just, let me frame how we're going to talk about this when I want to talk to you about traction. Here's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about you need traction, but traction works a lot better when you've got at the core this culture of productivity, goals being aligned. It all kind of, you want to tie in every aspect you reach out or you try to get traction in needs to tie back to your core mission. And so that diagram is just me a way of really talking to an engineer who's usually a founder. They've got some great invention or a code or a piece of hardware or AI, whatever the latest fad is. It's usually an engineer, and I'm trying to present this in a way of install this. There's inputs, there's outputs. It's a black box. It's something you understand, Mr. Engineer. It's not a soft science. You can actually set up these systems and see the results, measurable results if you'll plug this in. And so, yeah, that diagram on the homepage it frames how I talk about it, but it also tries to present to a logical thinking engineer founder how you should think about perhaps some of these softer skill things you're going to run into needing as you scale, as you grow. So it's, again, there's nothing special about the Grip or the Grip OS. There's firms out there that do what we do. It's just my way of talking about it, I guess. So,
I think what's special is the fact that you've coined something, though, and like we're talking about systems, like that's a repeatable process. So I wouldn't downplay it too much. It's pretty impressive. So yeah, I recommend go to thegripgroup.com and check that out. So can you take me through the process then? So you're sitting down, you've done some kind of audit discovery, you got your first conversations going. How are you walking your founders through this? Because like for us at Ditto, we have 4 areas that we'll go in, and through our audit, we'll take a look at ops, leadership. We'll look at tech, the software they're using. We're looking at what's happening on the financing side, whether it be through invoicing and billing or anything like that. And then we're looking at people, so how we're onboarding, how we're managing our people, how we're tracking success for our people, and then based on that, we come back with recommendations, high-level recommendations on what systems could look like, what processes could look like, and how tech could integrate kind of all of that so we can move towards something that is more repeatable, more sustainable, right? So what does your process look like when you do actually engage, and how are you identifying those key areas that you need to analyze and address, and then ultimately improve their systems?
Yeah, it sounds, we probably take an approach that sounds pretty similar to yours. There's kind of an intake form, just some standard questions we ask that, where are you? Where are you trying to go? And that helps us. We're, of course, framing that up to help them set their goals and their OKRs. But we're also getting a sense of, what's your starting point? Do you have some systems in place? It's one of the things that I think I don't know if I'm curious to hear how you actually implement gathering this information, because we have an ASANA template, and it's a checklist of things, and sometimes we have to prune it if it's not relevant. We have basically a standard template. We'll prune it, fit it for the client. But that is the point where we start. I don't like email. I don't like misused email. Let me put it that way. I don't like email becoming a silo and a communication blocker. We plug our clients into ASANA immediately. If you're coming on board, you're going to now be invited to this team. You're going to start being assigned things out of, even in our onboarding process. And that's so we try and, not just eating our own dog food. That's just the most effective way to get them plugged into and onboarding, start to see the benefits of some of this work management systems. So
Right.
yeah, I'm kind of jumping into specific. The way we actually jump into day one implementation is it's templated, it's systemized, and it's always changing, right? I'll add 2 to 3 new things to the potential checklist next week, probably if I think it's relevant. But you don't want to go in too rigid either. That's important. This is a structure. There are some best practices built in, but you got to listen to the client. You got to figure out where they are. What is their appetite right now? Is it already somebody who said, "Yeah, I love this. Give me more," or is it somebody that you feel kind of backing off and feeling overwhelmed? You need to be able to adjust. But again, I always, I'm appreciative of their big picture, but I try and impart on them how important it is to do something this week. Let's make this week a success. How do we define success? How do we get traction? And that's just kind of my mindset with any problem I solve is how do we, yes, I understand where we're trying to get. What's tomorrow? What are we doing today and tomorrow? So
Yeah.
And I think our onboarding process reflects that. Yeah,
Yeah, good. I love that approach. And that goes back to what I was saying about those quick wins, right? It's like, what can we do to come in right away and really change things for you? I mean, the client sees the value right away, right? And you build that trust, right? And then you help them get out of the weeds that much faster. I mean, so for us, as far as the process goes at Ditto, we sit down and we go through a paid engagement. So it would be like an audit. We do, a couple calls with them. We go through, look at all their tech, look at their SOPs, and kind of identify, like where you at, right? And then we come back with a scope of work after that, and we take them through our deep dive, which is a series of interviews with all of their team members, departments, whatever it may be, documenting and pulling a lot of that information out of them and asking, what's not working throughout all this, right? Where do you feel that the roadblocks are within your specific department? So we listen, gather all that information. We design a framework that, we think makes sense as far as where does the tech fit, what SOPs are needed, who's responsible, who is just overseeing, what approvals are needed, where are they needed. A lot of that happens in Asana, which is great. And what we find the issue is, going in and engaging with a lot of agencies, which is primarily who we work with, is that everyone has their kind of ideals of how they work, right? Like, so there are silos put up immediately where some people like specific work management platforms, some people like Dropbox, other people's like, Google Drive or something like that. And then there are just different understandings of where the work happens. And so obviously for leaders, right, we don't have a shared understanding of where a project is at. There's this like common theme that I talk about quite a bit called work about work, right? Where instead of working on this skilled work that we're hired to do, that our clients are paying us to do, we spend time in the weeds trying to figure out where things are, or what the status of a project is. And so through this deep dive, we uncover all of that. We give them a framework for what it could look like, and then we assign a timeline for actually putting it together. And then there's ongoing support after the fact. But it's so important to really, and what we found to be really beneficial is to talk to those different departments, because when you sit down with the founder, in your case, you're talking to startups, you're getting one side of the picture, right? You're getting one person to say, this is what I want done, but then it all falls apart when the team is not, adopting to the software we're using. They don't understand the process. It's confusing. They haven't been brought into the process either, and they're just being told what to do, right? So for us, it's really helpful to hear from the other people, kind of around, and bring them around the table at the end of it. So.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and if I could just kind of piggyback on that, that's when we first talked, and I kind of heard your approach and your philosophy on us, like-minded. In fact, in my head, I'm thinking, okay, Ditto's just become part of our onboarding for future clients. That's got to be required. And so, I love your philosophy on work about work. Just pointing out the efficiencies and just you probably use more nuanced language. I just call it dumb. It annoys me to see work about work. Yeah, I get annoyed. Yeah. And I've gotten better about hiding, and being patient. But these quick wins that you're talking about, it becomes a habit. They start to get in the habit of seeing, and traction becomes addictive. That's they start to feel traction, and so every time they define a goal, they get in the habit of defining what's the quick win we're after. It's like bowling or putting. I don't know if you bowl or you golf, but you don't really at that 15-foot putt. You don't look at the hole. You line up the hole. You figure out the read on the green, and then you figure this spot 3 feet out in front of you that you need to hit. Or bowling.
Is that how you do it?
Yeah, that's how you do it. If you, I'm sure you've been bowling. You see the triangles in front of you. Don't look at the pins.
Yeah.
Look at the triangles in front of you. They're the guys. So yeah, I don't want to use that metaphor in my head all the time. What are we putting at really?
That's a really great metaphor. Yeah, just on the golf thing for a second. I've been golfing for a long time, kind of on and off, but last summer I really took a liking to it. I mean, we're in lockdown, obviously, and so I probably went out like a dozen times, did a 9 or an 18 a couple times.
It's a stupid game, isn't it? It's a way to ruin a walk. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But maybe I'll take some pointers from you as we keep chatting.
Yeah.
Let's talk more about OKRs, because I know on your website, like I've read Measure What Matters by John Doerr, and you have that on your website as well. And so a lot of what you're doing, you're helping these startups to establish those OKRs. What are your thoughts, I think, like on the whole system? How do you approach it? How do you make sense of it? And how do you break it down to these teams? Because we know that for OKRs to work really well, we have to have the company organization. Where are we going? What's important from a mission value standpoint? And then there can be, I should say, department or team OKRs. And so how are you breaking that down with, between the founder, teams, departments, and all the people to make it all come together? Can you walk us through that a bit?
Yeah, I think there's a lot said out there, and you can Google kind of the approach, what works and what doesn't. If you're dealing with a large organization and they've already kind of got their established silos, their ways of working, it's highly recommended that when you roll out OKRs, you start with kind of a pilot approach. You figure out either the department or maybe it's the executive level. They try it for a quarter or two, work out the bugs. People around them see it working. They kind of buy in without being introduced to it right away. There is a smart way to introduce OKRs to a large organization. My audience is generally a little bit earlier than that. Perhaps the beginning of some of these silos and departments have started to form, engineering, maybe marketing and sales. But as far as selling the OKRs and implementing them, I tend, at least we have the opportunity most of the time to get them early enough where it can be company-wide. And so the challenge for us actually becomes on the other end. We're too small to need OKRs right now. We don't have these problems. And so I'm not really setting up pilots in an organization trying to get adoption in a large organization. I'm trying to get adoption into a small enough organization where they don't think they need this yet, or they don't see the need. And I have to say, you don't need it as badly yet. But I don't care if your team is 3 or 5. I guarantee you at that table, you're sitting, and the kind of the measure is once you get big enough, and not everyone can fit at the table, you start meeting some of these goals and productivity systems. I think it's before that. I think if you're sitting a team of 3 to 5, if you're assuming that everybody's on the same page, that you're all thinking about the same goals, you're probably wrong. You're probably projecting, you're probably making assumptions that are unhealthy. And I promise you, when that 6th or 7th or 8th person comes to the table, you're making some unhealthy assumptions. And so now's the time, even at this stage, even if it's OKR light, even if it's just milestone, really simple key results, even if it's, the key results are very elementary, set them and get in the habit of setting them now. So most of my convincing is not, how to do a successful implementation at a large organization. It's how to implement early and keep it where they don't get in the way. They don't become a burden. They become a tool and a way of giving direction to a small team that can now scale. So usually part of, the sales pitch for me is to convince them that at some point you're going to hit something. You're going to hit an inflection point where you need to grow fast, and you're going to raise some money. You're going to have to start hiring people. You're going to have to start hiring the right people. You got to have a system in place and a culture in place. It needs to be in your DNA early, and you're ready to grow. And even if you run into founders who think, yes, I don't need it. I don't need it right now. I can fix it later. Because, Silicon Valley, it's, cash is king. I need to save the cash. I need to make it, my runway. I got to keep my eye on a runway. That's very valid. And it's very valid sometimes to think I can fix my operational problems later, just like I can fix my technical debt. You get coding gets messy, and there's a thing called technical debt that needs to be fixed. You put that off too late, and it's expensive to fix. But of course, you're thinking, well, that's a problem for later. Same kind of comes with productivity and operational debt or cultural debt.
Okay.
I can fix it later. Yes, you can fix it later. It's going to cost you, and maybe yes, if you're able to raise, you're going to spend somebody else's money fixing it. That's fine. But while you're fixing that, you've got a competitor who already fixed it, that did do it right, and they're now scaling faster than you, and they're hiring the best people, and they're getting the best customers, and you're falling behind because you put this off. And so I like to think it's yes, just solve the debt. Don't go too into debt. Don't technically with your code and operationally with your systems. Get it solved now and be ready to scale, because your investors, your board's going to expect you to have answers for this. Go ahead and assure them early you're set up for this. And so that's part of what, of course, pitching grip again is we can install that for you. We let us provide not just the people, but the processes. And that's, you kind of tied back to your question about onboarding. We don't just come in and build this system and make these suggestions and hand you spreadsheets and a thing. We're actually going to put in the people, become part of your team and help you run this quarter to quarter for years out if we can stick around. And so we kind of talk about just install this early. And that's, that's our approach, at least, of simplifying it for them, making it important to them early.
Absolutely. Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. I have two questions out of that. One of them I probably should have asked earlier, but you're talking about like getting started early and working with these startups. Will you work with startups that are at a certain stage as far as their funding goes? First question, and then I'll ask the other one afterwards.
Yeah, I have a problem that I can't turn down any startup to some degree. I want to, I want to help, but I would be cautious if it's a single person, a single founder, or a team of 2 or 3, and they're really just and their definition of traction at that stage should be focus on the product, get product market fit, do some experiments, do some agile kind of experiments in the market, and keep iterating until you can claim or feel good about product market fit.
That's more or less where I was going. Sorry, I should have explained it further, but like, would you work with them at a certain stage, around like their funding, or like making sure that they've worked out a lot of these early, stage startup, kinks,
Yeah, definitely. I could plug in usually, if they've got the cash and they've got I say, when I say cash, I don't mean that. I just mean if they've got the funds, if it's not going to be hurtful to them, to their runway, to bring in someone like Grip to help them with that, we're there for them. But a lot of times at that stage, I'm perfectly comfortable saying you don't quite need us yet. Call me. I want to talk to you about it. We can, but I can point you to this book, this resource. Get your traction going. We shouldn't be part of your traction right now. No, we're here. I want to sell you. When you need this, I want to be the person you reach out to, because we've got the solution when you reach that stage. But I'd rather at that stage just set them up for get the right type of traction you need now to be, it's going to get you to that next milestone. Don't get distracted too early with having your systems and your ERP lined up and your CRM installed and your sales processes and your maps. That's probably a little premature. So their timing is important. But I guess in my pitch, I'm just trying to make it important to them to think of these systems earlier, productivity earlier, and not later when it's too late. It should become a priority at some stage. So it varies. It depends on the team, their trajectory, what kind of traction they already have. But there's usually a graceful way to fit in to their growth that benefits them and makes sense to everybody. So.
Got it. And getting back to OKRs, like when it comes to setting them with these teams, like what is that sweet spot? How many should we have? How many key results we're tracking against? And then, how often are we updating them or even reviewing them to see if they need to be updated? How do you usually walk people through, setting up those OKRs and establishing where they're going to start?
Yeah, I lean on best practices that have already kind of been established. Set your OK. It's
Yeah.
good to have big, hairy, audacious goals. That you need to have that. You need to
Mm-hmm.
change the world, right? That has to be out there. That's step one. What is your mission?
Yeah.
Because that's going to inspire people, inspire your team long term. You have to have that true north, that star that everybody's working towards. For your OKRs, you want to get a little more specifics. Probably quarterly. That you set an objective, and then you set up your key results to measure that quarterly and adjust those quarterly.
Yeah.
But it can be, depending on what you're doing, you need to do weekly updates to the status and the key results. We kind of like to integrate a little bit of OKR thinking with a little bit of Scrum and Agile, kind of all these things in this kind of hybrid thing. You want to get structured about your feedback system. It needs to become addictive. As a founder, as a CEO, once you start seeing the results of these feedback sessions and how it helped you at some point realize an opportunity you need to pursue or avoid an error that you almost made, a mistake you almost made, it becomes addictive.
Yeah.
It becomes your dashboard, and that we're big on dashboards too, Curtis. It all needs to feed this overall view. And if you don't have a system in place that's gathering the data, these are the inputs. That's the metrics, the APIs that you need to tie into and feed this dashboard. Hard data. There's check-ins that needs to happen weekly, almost real time, if possible. But as far as OKRs, back to your question, quarterly is fine usually, and you kind of set your stretch goals. There's different approaches to setting those OKRs, and it kind of depends a lot on the culture. But yeah, OKRs are pretty much quarterly. Your KPIs, I would say 2 or 3.
Right.
Really, at early stage, there's going to become something that's the most important thing for the quarter. And if that's true, make it the only thing you focus on that quarter. Get that traction. Be able to, one of the most powerful things about any goal-driven discipline is knowing what to say no to. And I love this. It's Stephen Covey, I think he said, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing.
Yeah.
You gotta,
right.
So that type of focus that can only come in. Even personally, I have trouble sometimes. I've got so many things I'm working on. I'll come to my own personal OKRs, and I've literally got them in ASANA at the goals level. And what did I say I'm going to try and do this quarter? Because I just got distracted last week, and I got pulled away, and I need to get back on track. So,
cool. And what's the advice you give to founders to get their team to buy in, right? Because for us, we do the same thing. We have 3 objectives per quarter. They're in ASANA. They're at the goal level, right? And then we have underneath that our key results. So what are we going to measure against, right? And then in our quarterly leadership meetings, we're saying, how are we doing? We're looking at this stuff monthly, looking at it all the time. And what I like about the ASANA platform is that you can tie in the projects that your team is working on, so you can see how we're tracking against that bigger goal. So, I just got off a performance review with one of our staff members, and they said that they wanted to feel, more like they were a part of something, like they were growing something. So that we're working on projects as a team that ultimately are leading us to being able to achieve our revenue goals, our client success and retention goals, right, our culture goals, right? And so that's how we kind of tie it in, where we can bring the people in and say, this is where we're going, this is the vision, this is where I've set out where we want to go, this is how you tie into that, this is going to be your contribution. So how do you pass that down to these founders of these startups that have a million things that they're balancing? They have a board to answer to, they have stakeholders to answer to, they have a team to answer to, they have their job that they're fighting for, right? How do you get them to bring it down to their team where they can be inclusive rather than saying, hey, follow me or get off the bus? What does that look like?
Yeah, well, a couple things kind of popped in my head. First, I don't know if it's me being lazy or effective, but I rely on the credibility. I borrow the credibility of OKRs. I talk to a founder and say, look, you don't have to believe me. Just do a little research. Right. I can show you OKRs. When OKRs fail, when the implementation of OKRs, and they do fail, but it can just about always be tracked back to either lack of top level buy-in. It just wasn't important enough to push to catch hold in the organization. It's got to become important to that founder. And so there is a little bit of I lean heavily of, no, here's what you want to be. Here's how the people before you got there. Don't reinvent the wheel. Let's tie into what already works. Let's adapt it as it needs to be adapted for you, for sure. And let's adapt it as it's going to work best for your team, for sure. There's different flavors of sauce you can put on top of OKRs that make it more palatable to people. But
Sure.
but you've almost got to become unflinching, goal driven, um, a goal driven. I don't want to say taskmaster. That's the wrong approach. I kind of think of these systems as there's true justice and meritocracy in your team if you zealotly enforce productivity and visibility. Um, I've seen very often where even working in Asana, like if Asana's your lint, and I lean on Asana for a lot of the teams, and there's a controller at the finance consulting group, very soft spoken, extremely capable, extremely soft spoken. But those are the type of people that are so valuable to your team at some stage, but you may not see them all the time. They're not vocal. They're not opinionated. They tend to be a little quieter, but they are so valuable. And if this one person, because she is so organized and visible in Asana, you can't miss her. She's just quietly effective. And if you don't
Right.
if you don't have these systems in place, if your culture is going to miss that, if you don't have these systems in place, your culture is going to miss that. She's not going to be on your radar screen. I mean, if you want to see what she's working on, what she's accomplishing, what her blockers are, you can log in and see. You don't even have to go across the room to talk to her. She's that visible, and her whole team is effective that way too. So I don't know. I would say it's not you're not really it's not top down enforcement. It's creating a culture of meritocracy where people can thrive and their work can shine. That's another, not just getting work done. That's important, but as far as your culture, it's got to be there to build. That productivity needs to be part of your culture, and it's not just get things done. This is, it's not being a taskmaster. It's building an environment where people can align to the goals. They can know what they're supposed to be working on. They can see how they're contributing. They understand the bigger picture, but it's also a system where they can shine. It's documenting and really shining, tracking their growth to a certain degree. So.
Yeah. Oh, I love that answer. And you may have just said it, but like when it comes to, implementing either systems in organizations or implementing or rolling out OKRs, what do you think is one thing that founders or leaders in business are not considering? What are they missing? What are they often overlooking? Is there anything else that we might not have identified yet?
I think you hit on it. One of my favorite things is, and I love, I don't want to keep plugging Asana. There's a lot of good work management tools out there, but Asana's the one I think, of course, you favor and I favor. But I'm a big fan of tying the work to the goals. And I love it. I love that the system, I can set my goals. People can see that the tasks that they're assigned in Asana, they can see a due date, they can see the description, they can see the team, they can see the stakeholders that are following that task, but they can also see how does this contribute to the goal of the company, to the goal set this quarter, to the key results I'm supposed to be paying attention to. I've lost track of the question there because I got down a rabbit trail there, but yeah,
No, it's okay.
key.
I was just saying,
Yeah, the two things that popped into mind in your question were setting the goals right. You got to take some time to set up the right goals and the right KPIs that are going to mean something that are stretched but achievable, some kind of mix of those two dualities at the same time. But also make sure there's a clear path of tying the work I'm doing today to the goals we're trying to reach. And not every task you see in Asana, not every task you're doing every day is going to go toward the KPI. Or toward
Right.
the objective every day. There's some health metrics and some other things or some housekeeping you've got to do. But if you're figuring out that only 20% of the work I'm doing is not going towards goals, and if that's company-wide, your goals aren't right, or you're not being productive, there's some things, that's a red flag. You need to jump in and fix something there.
I love that. And I know we have been talking a lot about Asana. I'm not mad about it at all. If I could talk about just Asana all day, I absolutely would. But I know that you're not software, I know that you're software agnostic. And so can you kind of talk through your tech stack a little bit, how you stay organized yourself, what's your go-to for implementation, how are you staying organized and getting through your day? What do those pieces of software look like?
Yeah, my own personal tech stack is Asana heavy. That's the tool I'm using now.
Okay.
Now I have, I explore. One of the approaches we take we try and stay kind of agnostic. We have our favorites, we have our suggestions, but work management is a key. That's a core component for any implementation we go into. I don't, if you're using Trello, and a lot of times if you're engineering focused, your team may be more of a Jira or a Trello or a Pivotal Tracker based work management system, and that's fine. There's no need to unplug that or untangle you from that. Those can be adapted and used. So as long as you've got a good work management level, that's for me, that's the central part. Now on top of that, there's some really cool OKR development and tracking tools you could layer on top.
Okay.
Now I've only explored these. There's things like Ally and BetterWorks, and I shouldn't have started the list because there's a long list of a good dozen things you can choose for OKR. Yeah, OKR management. I would even throw Asana into the mix now as they've layered their goals. They got a good goals layer, and it's a good beginning. And it does an effective. Even if I don't think the interface is that pretty yet. I'm sure they're working on that. And
sure.
I think goals need to be. I like when goals are shown to a team in a little more inspiring format. It's a diagram. It's something a little pretty. It needs to be pretty. You need to pay attention to that because you are building dreams when you're talking about goals. And so it's better. It's better than a just list format. I'm sure they'll get there. Or there's going to be third parties that can provide that. But I still kind of tie back to the more important part is tying the goals to the work. So that's hard for me to let go of, and Asana does a good job of that. And so that's become core to our work is that connection between the goal-driven culture and the work being done. There's outside of the core work management system, there's other and things in the tech stack like just QuickBooks Online or Xero for the books. Bill.com. I'm thinking in the finance area right now. Bill.com, Expensify. I like to take, at least in the early stage, a kind of best of breed approach. Make sure that every tool you choose is really good at what it does. You're going to get adoption. It's going to be efficient, but it has to have an API that's talking to the other systems. So on the finance side, a general good tech stack is Bill.com, Expensify, QBO, or some variant of those three kind of talking to each other. I like to tie it to a dashboard. The dashboard of my choice right now is Grow. Grow does a really good job of, it's just a little bit of data warehousing, a little bit of data formatting, ETR. I've get my acronyms mixed up, but and a light layer of presentation, but it does a good job of just kind of doing all those three. So I like to, and the connection that overlays your marketing data from your APIs like Google Analytics, Facebook ads, Shopify, all these data sources that start maybe a silo. It pulls together data from the silo. It can overlay it. So you're seeing how does web traffic work, change to shopping cart activity. You can kind of overlay that. We just ran this new campaign. We're spending this much. What kind of traffic are we seeing? Overlay that. How's that converting to sales? How's that converting to revenue? How's that converting to work in Asana? So it's pretty cool when you start building all these kind of best of breed tools and you start tying them go via their APIs into a unified look. This is your dashboard. It's literally how you're driving the company. Imagine driving your car without your dashboard. You're gonna have a hard time.
And this is exactly why I love having these conversations. Yeah. There's so much to unpack. There's so many different options as far as software. I think something that you said, just to wrap it up, is have the tools, put them through their paces. I think, it's important to try them out and see how they work in your organization as well. Because, I know I'm guilty of that, shiny object syndrome, right? You see something and you want to jump on it, but it's not always about the tool. It's how you use it and adopt it, and the fact that your team does adopt that tool. So
the fun part about your and my job. The fun part about your and my job is it's our job to evaluate some of these tools, right? Yeah, we get the shiny objects.
Exactly.
We'll explore the shiny objects for you. And
recommend the best ones.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So.
That's it. Where can people hang out with you? Where are you online? Where can they get in touch with you?
I'm Trae, Trae, at thegripgroup.com. I'm out there. Social media. Feel free to link up. Trae. I spell my name a little funny. I guess you'll show that in the credits and all that. But I spell it right. Everybody else has Nickeloson wrong.
It's all good. Okay. Thanks so much, Trae, for being on the show. Like I said earlier, I can talk about this all day, and maybe we'll actually have to have a part 2. And we'll just have you come back at some
That'd be
point,
great.
but
And I'm going to hold you. You've offered to come on my show too, the group show, and we'll continue over there too. Yeah. I'm going to hold you
let's
to
do
it.
it.
So,
Let's
yeah.
do it. Let's continue the conversation. Well, thanks so much. It was good. We'll chat soon.
Yeah. Thanks, Marquis. Talk to you soon.
If you like what you heard today, please like, subscribe, and follow on your preferred channel. If you know of a friend or colleague that would benefit from hearing this conversation, please share it with them so that we can reach more listeners just like you. As always, all the links from today's talk will be in the show notes. And remember, if it isn't documented, it didn't happen. We'll see you next time.